Hello, and welcome to our extended series on improving our democracy. My name is Joshua Allen Landers. I'm a student here at San Jose State in the Communication Studies Department. This project has been supervised uh, by our professor Scott Lasco, the head coach of the Forensics Speech and Debate team. And the purpose of this series is to create 10 separate video presentations on various ways we could improve our democracy. Um, my pronouns are he and him, and I just want to thank you again for joining me on this journey through these presentations. So before we get started any further, we have to ask ourselves, what is democracy, or what is a democracy? A democracy comes from the Greek word demos, meaning people. In democracies, it is the people who hold sovereign power and legislator and government. Although nuances apply to the the world's various democracies, certain principles and practices distinguish democratic governments from other forms of government. Can we think of any? Anyone have any? No? Okay, we'll move on. Democracy government is which the power and civic responsibility are exercised by all citizens, directly or through freely elected representatives. So back in the day, in the early forms of democracy in Greece, it was one man, one vote. So there were no representatives. It would be every, um, I guess, free man in the state of Greece would come to the committees and the meetings, and one man had one vote, and winner take all situation. Here in America, our democracy is a bit different. It's a representative democracy, so we elect officials to go and represent us in the House of Congress, in the House of Representatives, in the Senate, and even locally, city council and things like that. Moving on, continuing. Democracy is a set of principles and practices that protect human freedom. It is the institutionalization of freedom. Democracy rests upon the principle of majority rule, coupled with individual and minority rights. All democracies, while respecting the will of majority, zealously protect the fundamental rights of individual and minority groups. Democracies guard against all-powerful central governments and decentralize government to regional and local levels, understanding that local government must be accessible and responsive to people as possible. Which is a very important point here, is that one of the things that makes democracy so special is that we don't just have Washington, D.C. deciding rules, regulations, laws, codes where we live out here in San Jose, California. So it allows us to localize and govern ourselves a little bit more. Democracies understand that one of their prime functions is to protect such basic human rights as freedom of speech and religion, the right to equal protection under law, and the opportunity to organize and participate fully in the political, economic, and cultural life of society. Democracies conduct regular, free, and fair elections, open to all citizens. Elections in democracy cannot be facades that dictators or single parties hide behind, but authentic competitions for support of the candidates, which is a very important aspect of democracy that we're going to get to in one of the later presentations about campaign finances and separating big money from the elections to make sure that we maintain what I mentioned here, which is a free and fair election to all citizens. We don't need facades. All right, so moving on, we're going to be talking about one way to improve our democracy here in the United States, and that is by improving and expanding our public education, as you can see from the title. So what is public education? Public education refers to the tax-funded schools all the way from elementary school to postgraduate school at one of our public universities. As you may know, San Jose State is a public university. It's the oldest California state school in the state of California. Education is a universal human right. It also means achieving other human rights and is empowering social economic tool. Through the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the world's nations have agreed that everyone has the right to education. Every society transmits its habits of mind, social norms, culture, and ideals from one generation to the next. There is a direct connection between education and democratic values. In democratic societies, educational content and practice support habits of democratic governance. And I want to stop and talk about that just for a sec because education is so important for democracy because we are the ones responsible for the future of the nation, if that makes sense. So, whereas some other nations or historical societies in the past have only allowed educated men to vote and things like that, it's important for democracy, a free democracy, to be open and available to everyone. But in order to have a vote and to make that vote count, it's important that we're all informed and educated on the different issues that face our society. So education is really important for democracy. Yeah, like I said, it transmits the habits of mind, social norms, culture, and ideals. Um, this education transmission process is vital in democracy because effective democracies are dynamic, evolving forms of government that demand independent thinking by citizenry. So that's just a little bit more what we were just speaking about a little bit earlier about how a democracy doesn't work without education because it needs its citizen to make informed and educated decisions on the future of that society. Currently, we are only required to earn a high school diploma or the equivalent certification, but the more educated voters are, the more informed their votes can be. And I think this is an issue that we are dealing with in contemporary politics, is that you can say that the truth isn't as universal as it once was, or um, education isn't as universal as it once was, meaning that maybe people on the right have received a different education on certain topics than people on the left. Um, and that is detrimental, and it's extremely detrimental to the direction of our democracy. Um, I had a short video here that we're going to skip. But what this short video does is pretty much expands on what I was just saying about the connection between education and democracy. Um, right? Because if it's not a democracy, say it was a monarchy, there's no need for me or anyone else to be educated on political aspects such as maybe global politics, the global economy, local issues, things like that. There would be no need for me to stay educated or update because the decision making is solely in the hands of those in power. So democracy kind of spreads that out a little bit. So when we're talking about how improving and expanding our education would improve our democracy, what do we mean? Well, how would improved education programs improve our democracy? Now, here's a quote from an American president, FDR, which I thought was just incredible and really poignant for this topic. Democracy cannot succeed unless those who express their choice are prepared to choose wisely. The real safeguard of democracy, therefore, is education. And yeah, that's kind of the point that I'm getting at when I'm talking about the importance of education to a democracy, is that if we aren't educating ourselves on the rights that we need to protect and the importance of these rights, then we never will be able to protect them. It's kind of what he's saying there. And I think it's important because if we don't learn our history, history will repeat itself. So to continue, if people learned how to think for themselves at school and think incisively, they would be less likely to succumb to manipulation and false arguments in debates and politics. And that's what I was kind of getting at earlier. There are many politicians that they say things as if they're factual, which are simply not factual. And if we were to expand our education or improve our education, this mass misinformation would not be able to go off without a hitch because people would know that it's not the truth, right? So it's clear such an approach would provide the most important positive change to our democratic choices. Integrating critical thinking as a core subject has long been on the agenda for some people who want positive education reform. Add media literacy and civics as importance, if not core subjects, and society would not be would not be well on the way to a superior democracy in which debate is based on reason and fallacies rejected. So yeah, what I'm saying there is pretty much that if we were to base our education a little less on algebra and a little bit more, since we are in charge of the decision making for this country, if we were to focus it a little bit more on practicing how to come up with those decisions, things like critical thinking, things like media literacy and civics. These things will create a more civically engaged and a more civically capable generation of voters. So as we move on towards the conclusion here, the importance of education, democracy relies on its citizens to govern themselves. That's why it's important for the citizenship to be an educated and civically engaged one. Literacy enables people to stay informed through newspapers and books. Informed citizens are better positioned to improve our democracy. Education systems in democracy do not persuade the study of political doctrines or systems of government. Democracies encourage students to develop reasonable arguments based on careful research, clear understanding of history. Across the world, the correlation between education and democracy is extremely high. Evidence suggests that schooling leads to democracy, but there is no evidence that democracy leads to schooling. Democracy is predicated on citizens' informed engagement. Wow, I really love that last line. Democracy is predicated on citizens' informed engagement. And so the point of this presentation, the reason why I chose education as a topic point for how we can improve our democracy is because democracy is built on citizens' informed engagement. So if we do spend a little more time on the informed part, then the engagement might be a little more valuable. The historic connection between education and democracy are some things that we already went over, but just to kind of conclude, I think that improving our democracy in terms of subject matter that we improve, in terms of consistency across areas in our education, and in terms of expanding it, in terms of making it a little bit more accessible for more people, these things are going to improve our democracy because our democracy relies on its citizenry being educated. So I have a quick quiz question for you before I go, and then that'll be it. Why did FDR say the real safeguard of democracy, therefore, is education? Is it, take a look at these answer choices here, and let me know when you've come up with your answer. You got it? And the answer was A. So democracy cannot succeed unless those who express their choice are prepared to choose wisely. Here are some of my sources for you to take a look at. And again, I thank you very much.